and I am captain of Team Wemby.
Do you think Wemby can carry the Spurs to a title this year?
No.
San Antonio was up 29 points in Game 4 of the NBA Finals. Not in November, not against a lottery team. In June, at Madison Square Garden, with a chance to tie the series. The Spurs had dropped 41 points in the first quarter, scored 76 by halftime, and for long stretches looked completely in control. Then the game tightened. New York kept coming. San Antonio's shots got harder. Every turnover mattered more. Every empty possession felt heavier. And with 1.2 seconds left, OG Anunoby tipped in the basket that completed the largest comeback in NBA Finals history. 3 nights later, the Spurs built another lead. 16 points this time. That disappeared too. New York won the championship 4-1. But that score leaves out the most interesting part of what happened. San Antonio repeatedly showed it could play championship-level basketball. It just couldn't sustain it long enough to finish. So the real question isn't simply why the Spurs lost. It's whether that loss exposed their ceiling or created the version of this team the rest of the NBA should actually worry about. If you enjoy stories that go beyond the final score, subscribe. Because to understand how San Antonio reached that moment, you have to go back to when a finals appearance still seemed years away. A year earlier, San Antonio wasn't preparing for June basketball. It was trying to understand what its future even looked like. Greg Popovich suffered a mild stroke in November 2024 and stepped away after only 5 games. Mitch Johnson took over the bench, suddenly responsible for guiding a franchise that had spent nearly 3 decades under one coaching voice. Then came February. Victor Wembanyama's season ended after he was diagnosed with deep vein thrombosis in his right shoulder. Shortly afterward, De'Aaron Fox underwent surgery on his left 5th finger. San Antonio finished 34-48 and missed the postseason again. There was talent everywhere, but very little certainty. Popovich formally ended his coaching career in May 2025 and moved into basketball operations. Johnson became the permanent head coach. Then San Antonio jumped 6 spots in the draft lottery and landed the 2nd pick. Dylan Harper arrived. Now the Spurs had Wembanyama, the number 1 pick from 2023. Stephon Castle, the number 4 pick from 2024. Harper at number 2 in 2025. And Fox, an established veteran scorer, trying to fit between all of them. San Antonio had collected talent. What nobody knew was how quickly it would stop looking like a rebuilding team. The answer came almost immediately. San Antonio went from 34 wins to 62. But the record alone doesn't explain what changed. The previous year, the Spurs had ranked 19th offensively and 25th defensively. In 2025-26, both units climbed to 3rd. That matters because this wasn't simply Wembanyama carrying an unfinished roster. The team around him had started to make sense. Wembanyama averaged 25 points, 11.5 rebounds, and more than 3 blocks per game. He became the first unanimous Defensive Player of the Year and finished 3rd in MVP voting. Keldon Johnson accepted a bench role and won 6th Man of the Year. Harper made All-Rookie First Team. Castle became much more comfortable creating for others instead of simply defending and attacking gaps. The Spurs weren't just talented anymore. They had answers. And in December, they received their first major test. Oklahoma City entered the NBA Cup semifinal at 24-1. San Antonio beat them 111-109. For a team that had been losing 60 games only a few seasons earlier, it felt like validation. 3 nights later, however, came something much less comfortable. New York. San Antonio led the Knicks by 11 in the NBA Cup final. The Spurs entered the 4th quarter ahead 94-89. Then the game changed. New York won the final period 35-19 and took the cup, 124-113. At the time, it was easy to treat that as one bad quarter in December. Young teams lose leads. Contenders have rough nights. There was no reason yet to turn one game into a prophecy. And San Antonio didn't collapse afterward. It got better. The Spurs finished 2nd in the West, beat Portland in 5 games, then handled Minnesota in 6. Castle looked increasingly comfortable in playoff basketball, and Wembanyama was beginning to impose himself on entire series. Then came Oklahoma City again. Fox entered the Western Conference Finals dealing with a right ankle problem and missed the first 2 games. That should have been a major problem. Instead, it opened a door San Antonio hadn't planned to open this quickly, because about an hour before Game 1, 20-year-old Dylan Harper learned he was starting against the defending champions. Basketball careers eventually get reduced to numbers, awards, and whatever people remember from the biggest loss. But the players living through those moments are learning under pressure in real time. If you want the full stories behind basketball's most unforgettable and misunderstood moments, subscribe. Because Harper's next game changed the way San Antonio had to think about its future. Harper started beside Castle, Devin Vassell, Julian Champagnie, and Wembanyama. The average age of that lineup was 22 years and 346 days, the youngest starting five ever used in a conference finals. And they weren't overwhelmed. Wembanyama finished with 41 points and 24 rebounds. Harper gave San Antonio 24 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, and 7 steals, a Spurs playoff record. San Antonio won in double overtime. It was the kind of performance that makes a front office excited and slightly uncomfortable at the same time, because Harper had just shown that his role might already be smaller than his ability. And Castle was developing too. Suddenly, the Spurs weren't simply Wembanyama plus Fox and some young pieces. They had multiple creators growing at different speeds, all trying to find their place around the same superstar. The series went 7 games. San Antonio went into Oklahoma City for Game 7 and won 111-103. Wembanyama was unanimously named Western Conference Finals MVP. A team that had won 34 games 1 year earlier was going to the NBA Finals. And here's the important part. San Antonio hadn't reached the finals after figuring everything out. It had reached the finals while still discovering what some of its best players could become. That made the ceiling look enormous. Then New York showed them the difference between reaching championship level and surviving there. Game 1. San Antonio led by 14. New York won 105-95. Game 2. San Antonio led by 12. New York won 105-95. Game 2 followed the same pattern. The Spurs built another 12-point advantage. The Knicks erased it. This time, San Antonio recovered and won. Then came Game 4. The Spurs were up 19 after one quarter, 27 at halftime, 29 at their peak, and still lost 107-106. Game 5 was different only in the size of the lead. San Antonio went up 16. New York came back again and won the championship, 94-90. The Spurs held a double-digit lead in every game of the series. New York erased every one of them. That doesn't mean the Knicks simply waited for San Antonio to panic. New York finished the postseason 16-3 and owned the best playoff defense. Jalen Brunson repeatedly controlled the possessions that mattered most. When San Antonio made mistakes, New York punished them, and the problem belonged to more than one player. Wembanyama still averaged 26 points and more than 11 rebounds in the finals, but his efficiency dropped late in games as his minutes climbed far beyond his regular season workload. Fox had an even harder series. He averaged 12.8 points while shooting just over 34% from the field. Meanwhile, Harper scored 21 in Game 4, then 25 in Game 5. By the end of the series, San Antonio didn't have a talent problem. It had a decision problem. When playoff possessions slowed down and one clean shot mattered, who was supposed to control the game? Fox had been brought to San Antonio for exactly those moments. He had years of experience, an All-NBA season behind him, and had once won the league's Clutch Player of the Year award. One poor finals doesn't erase that, but Harper's rise couldn't be ignored either. Castle was becoming a more capable initiator. Harper was showing he could create against playoff defenses. Wembanyama remained the center of everything. That left San Antonio with a problem most teams would love to have. Fox, Castle, Harper, Wembanyama, multiple players capable of creating an advantage. Only one basketball when the game reaches its final 2 minutes. And instead of responding to the finals loss by tearing the roster apart, the Spurs chose continuity. Players already under contract represented roughly 94% of the previous season's minutes. Wembanyama signed a long-term extension. Julian Champagnie was extended. Harrison Barnes returned. Tobias Harris arrived to add veteran experience. San Antonio kept investing in young talent through the draft. The organization appeared to believe the answer wasn't starting over. It was learning. Mitch Johnson said afterward that the Spurs simply weren't ready to win an NBA championship. Wembanyama went even further. Obviously, we weren't ready. I wasn't ready to win a ring. That might be the most important statement from the entire season. Not because losing automatically makes a young team better. It doesn't. And not because San Antonio is guaranteed to become a dynasty. It isn't. But the Spurs were the second youngest finals team ever when age is weighted by playoff minutes. Most of this group had never experienced postseason basketball before this run. Now they know exactly how small the margin becomes in June. Which brings us back to that 29-point lead. It means two completely different things. San Antonio being capable of building that lead in an NBA Finals game proves how dangerous the team had already become. Losing it proves how much it still had to learn. Both can be true. The finals didn't answer whether Fox is the right late-game partner for Wembanyama. They didn't tell us how large Harper's role should become, or how Castle fits if both players need the ball more. They didn't prove Mitch Johnson will solve the late-game problems next time, and they definitely didn't guarantee San Antonio another trip to the finals. But they changed the team's experience. The Spurs entered the playoffs trying to discover whether their young core belonged at this level. They left knowing exactly what happens when one poor possession, one missed rotation, or one bad decision becomes the difference between holding a trophy and watching somebody else celebrate on your floor. That team had never experienced that before. This one has, and that's why this is not the same San Antonio Spurs anymore. So what do you think matters most now? Wembanyama taking another step? Harper getting a bigger role? Fox responding? Or San Antonio simply learning how to close? Tell me below. And if there's another basketball story you think deserves this kind of deeper look, subscribe and leave it in the comments.